Hey friends, welcome back. It's Ashley from That Homeschool Gal, and today I have something really cool to share with you. I am very excited that I got to learn to crochet lace in the last few weeks, and it's something that I have wanted to do for many years, but all those tiny stitches is just so intimidating that it just didn't happen for a while. And so I finally got to learn how, and I'm really excited because I found some really cool tips as I was working on this that I want to share with you guys so that if you ever want to try it yourself, you'll have a better chance of getting it right the first time because it definitely takes some work. One of the things I love about crochet lace is that it can literally be made such that it is crocheted into the fabric. And so I think that's just really beautiful. I love it. I think it's so cool, but it's also really challenging. So it took me some experimentation to figure out how to make that work. My first tip is on what size of crochet hook you're going to use. And I had to experiment with this a little bit before I figured out what I liked. So the label said to use a 1.5mm hook, and you would think that was tiny. But my first tip is actually to use an even smaller hook. I started off using this hook. It's a 1.25mm hook. And it worked. It was small enough that it went through fabric fine. But as I was working with it, occasionally when I would pull it back through the fabric, it would snag. And so I had the idea to start using this hook. And this is just the next size down. It's a 1mm hook. So that's 2 sizes down from what the crochet thread said to use, but I have had much better success with this hook just because it's so small that when you pull the thread back through your fabric, it doesn't tend to snag the same way. I realized as I was working that there's more than one thing that helps keep the fabric from snagging as you're pulling the crochet hook back through it. And in addition to my first tip of using a small hook, my second tip was to not be afraid to really get in there and to not just barely get the hook through the fabric, but like to keep going, because this hook is tapered. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's thinner here and thicker here. And so if you push it farther, it makes your hole bigger, which makes it much easier to draw the hook part back through with the thread without catching anything. There's just more room to work with. So my third tip is to mark where your stitches are going to go in the fabric. I get away with winging a lot of things. It showed that I tried to do that the first time when I was making crochet lace. I had a really pretty pattern going, and then my stitches where I was going into fabric, it got too close together and everything kind of bunched up, and it was still pretty. I'm still proud of it, but I would say definitely mark where you're supposed to go into the fabric because it will keep things a lot more even. It'll look a lot more finished. My fourth tip is really pretty closely related to the third one, and it's to mark where you're going to put in your stitches with a marking pin, not sewing pins. So I had tried originally to mark every so often on my fabric. It was 1/2 inch with the pattern I was using with a sewing pin, and I thought it'd be easier because I wouldn't have to worry about getting lines out of my fabric later. It wasn't easier. I found out pretty quickly that, for one thing, the sewing pins were like falling out of my fabric as I was working, which was definitely frustrating. And it seemed like I ended up going back and fixing a bunch of them because they were just a little bit off. And so I ended up getting out a marking pin. And as soon as I tried that, I knew that was the way to go. It was so much easier. It was so much faster. I had like half my pillowcase marked in the amount of time it would have taken me to, I don't know, mark out 7 little spots with pins. So definitely use a marking pin, not little sewing pins. My 5th tip might seem like a little bit of a no-brainer, but it made a world of difference for me. It is quite simply to start on a scrap piece of fabric. So I used this little piece of cotton fabric. It's just a scrap from another project, and I folded it over so I had a nice finished edge to work on, just like if I were working on the edge of a pillowcase or a napkin that was finished that I was putting lace on. And I was able to experiment with it, figure out what my stitch pattern was gonna be to make the lace, figure out some different things like, was it gonna snag? Was it gonna go through? Did I have the right size crochet hook? Just try it for the first time, and that really helped me. I don't think I would have been brave enough to start on a finished project like a finished napkin or a store-bought pillowcase. Like, I would have been too intimidated. So it made a big difference to me to just start with a scrap piece of fabric, and that's definitely something I'd recommend if you're interested in trying crochet lace as a beginner. Thanks for joining me today. I have a project I'm working on right now that is almost finished. In fact, here, let me give you a sneak peek. I'm excited to see how it turns out and share it with you. Oh, and if you liked this video, it'd be awesome if you gave it a thumbs up or subscribed. Thanks. Bye.